Hello and welcome into another episode of the Bulls Roundtable Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Gavin Dorsey, here joined by Michael Walton. We have an incredible week of Bulls basketball to talk about. Somehow, some way, the Chicago Bulls are 5-1, started on a 5-game win streak, just the third time in franchise history. The last two times ended up winning the NBA title, I believe, before ended up getting that streak snapped by the New York Knicks on Sunday. First, Michael, I wanted to ask today is November 3rd. How was your Halloween? What'd you go as?
Yeah, so had a pretty good Halloween. Mostly spent time with my family. No crazy parties or anything this year. Helping my brother out with his kids and doing a good job of watching the house and keeping an eye on the Bulls game at the same time. But for Halloween, I'm not really big on costumes again, unless of course I'm going to a party or something. So I would say this year my costume was someone Arturas Karnisovas proved wrong because I have been doubting him for quite some time, and I think as the Bulls got off to their best start in 29 years, I will have to give a little bit of credit to the Bulls front office. So as Halloween, I was a Bulls non-believer who has been converted, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely too early to convert still, a 5-1 start. But, for the record, that is crazy. I would always dress up on Halloween, no matter if I'm going out or not. My girlfriend and I ended up being Remy and Linguini from Ratatouille. It ended up happening to see a million other Linguini and Remy from Ratatouille's. I don't know why I didn't know that was the couple's costume of the year. I guess so, but I guess that's what we get for waiting until the last moment. I ended up Halloween afternoon running to Target to grab an apron, but we ended up coming in clutch with a little chef's hat and whatnot. Ended up working out all right. But so now, yeah, happy to get into the Bulls right now. So we would expect a little bit of the scaries to start the season. Ended up not so much. The Bulls have far exceeded their expectations to start the season. 5-1 at the top of the Eastern Conference. They beat the Pistons, the Magic, the Hawks, the Kings, and then split with the Knicks. So not bad teams by any means. Definitely not quite those, top of the league level teams, except for the Knicks, which the Bulls ended up splitting. But definitely still a lot to take away from what we've seen from this first week of Chicago basketball. Michael, what were some of your biggest takeaways from this incredible start that we've seen to the Bulls season?
Yeah, so when I sort of started off, obviously joking there, but being serious about being a Arturas Karnisovas sort of non-believer who has been converted to an extent, obviously we have a long way to go in this season. But the biggest storyline to me is player development. And it might seem a little bit, generic of a thing to say as a topic, but I think one of the bigger storylines for the Bulls coming into this season was many fans got to know a little bit about Peter Patton, who was the former shooting coach. Obviously, there are some disagreements. However, the relationship came to end. Patton no longer works for the Bulls, and they moved in a different direction, got a new head of player development, beefed up their staff, and made some internal promotions. And I think the people who cover the team and are around the team sort of have some faith in the new player development staff. But as far as fans, they were very much so attached to sort of the previous regime and the previous player development staff that they were worried that we would go into the season with a lot of young players and the Bulls wouldn't see enough growth from these players individually. Now you go through 6 games of the NBA season, and I think it's fair to say every young player on the Bulls has taken a pretty sizable step forward in terms of their development. And that itself is why the team is playing so well. There's not any one individual player, I would say, who is making this Bulls team great. It's every single young player on the team has gotten a little bit better. And then Nikola Vucevic, who you sort of know what he brings to the table, is doing what he does in terms of being a double-double machine who can shoot the three when he's really locked in. So I think Ayo Dosunmu, Josh Giddey, and Trey Jones, the 3 guards, stick out the most in terms of all 3 of those guys are playing great basketball. And Giddey himself is the closest to the star player, I would say. His usage percentage is pretty high. I think it's in the 27% range. And then you have everyone else on the team sort of using a similar amount of possessions to it's really a Bulls sort of attacking teams by committee on offense. So I think the biggest storyline is just you got great player development across the board. All of the young players look like they're improved. Matas Buzelis looks like he can be an MIP candidate. Ayo Dosunmu legitimately looks like he could win Sixth Man of the Year. So for a young team, just everyone looking a lot better than they did the previous season, I think has to be sort of where you start.
And I think kind of the main a facet of that has to be the depth. Chicago's got 6 scorers in double-digit figures. Any given game, they could have 7 or 8. Pretty deep rotation. I think we're also very prone to hearing the cliches from coaching and the cliches from players, and we have to hustle and we have to do this, and then it'll be better. And it seems like this is a team that just is really a team. We hear a lot about, how star power drives the NBA, and you can't really say that the Bulls have that. I mean, the closest thing to it is Matas Buzelis, who still has a long way to go. He's shown some incredible flashes, especially with his scoring, his movement off the dribble, and the flashes that he's had on defense as well, and his size and his versatility. But overall, this is really a team effort. It goes 7, 8 deep, and this isn't just, I think one of the things that I fell into the trap of when trying to predict this Bulls season was just thinking, how different is this from the last 3 Bulls seasons, really? It's a relatively similar roster. There's no great players, but a bunch of good players in the mix there. Vucevic getting older. Giddey had some flashes, but, we don't know if he can sustain that for the entirety of the season. And when everybody seems to have collectively taken this leap together, as you've mentioned, it's all really paid off. I mean, Chicago's 7th in the league in scoring, 12th in the league in points allowed on defense. They're shooting, incredibly efficiently. We can talk about whether that's sustainable or not overall. But I mean, anytime you have some kind of start like this, what it does for the team's confidence is just astronomical. And I think a lot of times when you have a bunch of young players like this who, are in that good but not great role, seeing the ball go through the net, literally and figuratively, does absolute wonders for, what this team can develop into in the future and what this team can be this season.
Yeah, and I would say, again, another sort of a hat tip to Arturas Karnisovas, and I should include Mark Eversley, as well, the general manager. A lot of times people make fun of the Bulls for being an organization that sort of focuses on character, really looking for the type of players and guys who are going to fit in the locker room and be about the team first. And, it's a fun thing to poke fun at with the team when the team is doing poorly. But when the team is playing well, like they are now, you see how much that stuff matters. At the end of the day, these are all human beings. And I think fans kind of disconnect from that when you're watching sports so much. And how much your locker room actually gets along plays a big role into how your team is performed, especially on the defensive end, where you have a lot of mistakes and everything is about, are you covering for that next guy to make sure that his mistake is sort of covered, whether or not you're put yourself in a compromising position. And something you see when you watch the Bulls is they are selfless on both sides of the ball. No one has any agendas. No one is sort of looking out for themselves, which is interesting, where you have several guys who are in contract years where you would expect that, in terms of Vucevic and Ayo Dosunmu and some others, and Kobe as well. I think a big thing here is just everyone gets along, and that's why defensively, again, they're locking in, they're listening to the coach. You mentioned there that, they were doing well scoring, they were doing well defensively. I believe in terms of defensive rating, the Bulls are still in the top 5 at this time. So when you look at even per 100 possessions, they're doing even better. Something I wanted to point out too that goes with, again, that character thing is defensively, these guys are very much buying into Billy Donovan. It's something that fans have finally started to give him a little bit more credit for, in terms of he has pretty much built a successful defense, or at least a moderately successful defense, every year he's been in Chicago, regardless of the personnel, which is something that's very impressive. And I think the biggest part of this Bulls start is they are playing fundamentally sound defense. The numbers kind of shocked me because across the board this year, teams are just fouling a lot. Across the league, I think the foul rate has went up considerably compared to last year. But right now, the Bulls are 3rd in opponents' 3-point makes. They're 4th in opponent 3-point attempts. And then they are 9th in opponent free throw attempts per game. So I think the limiting the threes is obviously huge. You want to run guys off the 3-point line. But like Giddey said after that last loss, they knew they weren't going to hold teams to shooting 26% from three all year. So how are you going to win games when teams are making their shots? And I think the Bulls have that answer, which is you keep them off the free throw line and you're making it an end-to-end normal game. The Bulls right now, like I said, they're top 10 in opponents' free throws. I believe they're giving up about 22 free throws a night. Which in the grand scheme of things is, very solid. There are teams giving up near, 40 free throws almost a night. So Bulls are playing very fundamentally sound defense. And when you're not giving up those free trips to the charity stripe, another thing it does is it doesn't allow your opponent to slow the game down. Getting to the free throw line, you bring that pace way down. You can get into your sets. You can get your defense set up. The Bulls keep opponents off the free throw line, so games just continue to be end to end, back and forth, running up and down. And when you're playing that track meet style, you're playing right into Billy Donovan's hand because he will go 10 or 11 deep, as you mentioned, with the depth. So I think you're just saying a team that finally has a full identity. Last year, it was just we're going to run up and down and jack a lot of threes. Now it's we're going to run up and down, but actually play some really good fundamentally sound defense and give ourselves a chance to be in a game even when someone is shooting hot. Because in that loss to the Knicks shot 47% from the free throw line. They made all 22 of their free throws, which is not often you see a team go 100% from the free throw line. But essentially,
You mean 47% from deep, not the.
sorry, 47%
Yeah.
deep, yeah. And then they hit.
I was like, they were, they were perfect at the free throw line, but they were outstanding from deep. And I think that was kind of the one thing, that we've looked at over the start of the season is the Bulls, over those first 5 games allowed 30.1% from deep. And the Knicks absolutely obliterated that last game.
Got way over that number. And a big part of that is you have to give credit to the Knicks. It was just some good shot making. It's not completely a game where I say it's just one of those nights, but I would say it was 50% one of those nights because Jalen Brunson got off to a ridiculously hot start. Karl Anthony Towns had a 3 where I believe Vucevic almost literally stepped on his foot and he still drained it with no problem. So they were just feeling it. But a big problem is the Bulls had been getting to the free throw line a little bit more themselves this year, especially Giddey and some other guys, Trey Jones as well. And they only had 11 free throw attempts, I believe, in that game. So the Knicks doubled them up from the charity stripe. And, even when you play up tempo and you get a lot of possessions, if you're getting doubled up at the free throw line, it's just going to be hard to keep pace. So I give the Bulls credit, even in the loss, for fighting back. They didn't really give up the entire time. It was just one of those games where, again, the shots were falling for the Knicks, and you combine that with the free throw attempts, it was always going to be a tough game for the Bulls to win without Ayo Dosunmu, who very quietly is 3rd on the team in points per game in the absence of Kobe White. So losing Ayo 16 points a night was very huge, and it was always an uphill battle. So I was kind of proud of the fight they put up, even knowing it was going to be a tough game that just saw you recently.
Certainly. And you touched on this a little bit, but I kind of wanted to go a little bit further in depth on it, is really just the coaching job that Billy Donovan has done so far this year with the Bulls. You mentioned a little bit opponents aren't really getting to the free throw line. That's because Chicago's not really taking a ton of risks. They're, near the bottom of the league in deflections, steal attempts, trying to force turnovers. And, they have really clogged the paint so much and, allowed their opponents to take those threes. Granted, they've missed them. We'll see how it balances out over the course of the season. But I do really give a lot of credit to Billy Donovan in looking at this roster and really figuring out what it is that this team is good at. So, you had talked about on the defensive end, there aren't really any stout defenders. I think, Isaac Okoro, we expect him to be one of the best perimeter defenders. Modest Buzelis depends on how much muscle he can put on, how confident he is in taking on those larger power forward center type roles, as a defender, because we know that Vooch is what he is as a defender. And Billy Donovan has had to adapt that, had to figure out what works. Let's keep our guys out of foul trouble so we can keep those, plus defenders, but maybe not elite defenders on the floor as much as possible. And then on the offensive end, I think it's remarkable what we've seen. I think this overall really centers around Josh Giddey and what he has been able to do. We talked about last year, this was just a running gun team. It was up and down the floor, beat opponents by being faster than them, by running in transition, and just by dominating them that way. And what we've seen this year is similar, but better. This is a team that doesn't have a ton of offensive star power. Vooch is consistent, Buzelis has his moments, and Giddey is shooting really well. But they have really embraced this offense as a team dynamic. This is a team that's 30th in the league in isolation percentage. They're second in the league in drives, third in passes made, leading in assists. Every single time they come down the floor, you can expect 3 to 4 different passes to be made, different cuts going in. And this team is still first in the league in transition scoring and third in the league in transition shooting percentage, but they've also been able to build a lot from that. Josh Giddey has the third most pick and roll initiation attempts this season, I believe just behind Luka and SGA. And even though he's not shooting remarkably on those, just 31% off of those as the ball handler, the fact that they've been able to mix up these kinds of looks has really just added a whole new dimension to the Bulls offense and made it so it's not just, running around like a chicken with their heads cut off, but actually, really being able to confuse the defense just because of how many fundamentally sound basketball players they have on both sides of the ball, but specifically on the offensive end. But yeah, just kind of wanted to give a big shout out to Billy Donovan because, the coaching job that he has done with this personnel, it's been remarkable in my opinion so far.
Yeah, and I'm spot on in agreement with you, just because another big thing that Donovan deserves credit for is something Giddey mentioned a little bit, which is he felt comfortable this year because he said he felt empowered by the coaching staff. And a big part of that is Donovan is sort of letting him explore the real estate, so to speak. He's giving Giddey a chance to sort of see what he can do in the absence of Kobe, because the Bulls just do need more offensively. They do need some aggression. And I believe as of now, the Bulls are sitting, I believe, in top 5 in offensive rating. And they fell down a little bit in defensive rating. So the team has kind of flipped back to what we expected, which is being a more offensive oriented team. And Giddey has clearly gotten the instruction from the coaching staff on what to do when defenders go under you on a screen, because that was something we saw the Bulls have a huge issue with. Defenders go under the screen on Giddey because they're not scared of him taking shots from deep. Now, Giddey is pretty confidently either just stepping right into that open three when they go under screens, or he'll do a little bit of a Zion Williamson, Ben Simmons type move where he uses the fact that you're giving him so much space under that screen to still find a driving angle and get into the paint. And right now, Giddey's taking a career high 6 free throw attempts a night. He could be shooting a little better from the line, but the fact that he's getting 6 free throw attempts a night, that is massive for someone who's never really been that type of free throw creator in his career. And if Giddey keeps up that aggressiveness driving to the rim when Kobe White comes back and you conceivably have more floor spacing, more space to work with, I think you could see the Bulls offense improve more than it has already, which would honestly make them, essentially close to the best offense in the league, which seems like a wild thing to be talking about with the Chicago Bulls this season. But that's what we're looking at. They're playing at a fast pace and they are absolutely shooting the lights out. Giddey himself, I believe, is still like at 47% or so from three, definitely above 40. And then I know you have Ayo Dosunmu at 47% from three. So you got guys just knocking down their shots. Vucevic, true shooting percentage is super high. He's playing well. And I think the biggest thing when I try to describe to people why the Bulls offense is succeeding so much, at least through these first 6 games, is just because it's such a balanced attack. When you talk about the opposing team going through the scouting report, I'm not really sure who you have at the top of the scouting report right now when you're facing the Bulls. I would assume Giddey, because he's going to have the ball so much and he's creating so much. But if you try to hone in on Josh Giddey, you're just freeing up a ton of shots for guys like Kevin Huerter, for Vucevic, for Trey Jones, guys who have all really understood how to take advantage of the defense sort of playing off of you, excuse me. So overall, it's just a total team effort. And the fact that the Bulls are playing like a Billy Donovan Florida Gators team, they're kind of playing like a college basketball team where just everyone might score 13 and they'll win that way. And I think in the modern NBA, that's kind of confusing for opponents to go against because there's not really many teams at all that are kind of built that way. So the Bulls are playing a unique brand, but a sustainable brand because they're not really counting on any one player.
Yeah, and I do have faith that the Josh Giddey free throw percentage will rise over the course of the season. That is not something that I'm heavily invested in at this point of the year, but I do think that the fact that he has added this 3-point shooting dimension to his game, as well as being more aggressive in driving to the paint, completely changes the outlook of what this Bulls team can become. Michael, I wanted to get into the next segment. I've got a couple questions for you, and I'm going to call this little mini game Real or Not Real.
Ooh,
we have watched 6 games of basketball, which means there are 76 in the regular season left to go. Potentially 77 if the Bulls were to make it all the way to the NBA Cup championship. Who knows? We don't know. But I've got a couple things here, and I want you to tell me if this is real or not real. Do you have faith that this will persist over the course of the season? You think you can do that? We're ready?
Oh yeah, we're definitely ready.
All right. So first of all, start in general. The Bulls 5-1, currently tied for the best record in the Eastern Conference with the Philadelphia 76ers. The Bulls are a top 4 team in the East this year. Real or not real?
Oh man, that is honestly, you gave me like the toughest one to start. I'm gonna. It's insane that like I want to, the natural Bulls pessimist, in me wants to say not real, but I'm gonna have to go real. I'm gonna say real. I wish the line was at top 5 or top 6 so I could skate around a little bit, but you're putting me on the spot and asking me to be confident in it. So I'm going to go real. And it comes from the fact that coming into the year, we all said the Eastern Conference is wide open. Everyone agreed we don't know who's going to dominate. We just know that the Cleveland Cavaliers and I believe the New York Knicks were the 2 teams that essentially everyone felt, based off of bringing back strong rosters, should be powerhouses in the East. Outside of that, we really just had a bunch of teams that were young and upcoming that I think everyone wanted to sort of anoint as that next team. Talking about like the Orlando Magic, who still have some huge issues with their offense and shooting woes that seem to last forever. The Detroit Pistons, who are unfortunately still dealing with injury to Jaden Ivey, who's going to be a big part of that backcourt and that core. And then obviously the Pacers and Celtics have huge injuries to their stars. And the Atlanta Hawks were obviously believed in with all of their offseason additions, but now they're dealing with an injury to Trae Young, which obviously changes that team quite a bit. So long story short here, when you look around the East, I'm even less confident in the top 4 teams in the East now than I was in the offseason. So with the Bulls missing Zach Collins and Kobe White only, I have no reason to believe with those players coming back that they're going to be dramatically worse than they are now. And a big thing I wanted to note, the reason I buy it as being real, the Bulls are, I believe, either 3rd or 4th in defensive rebounding percentage this year. They are 4th, actually. Their defensive rebound percentage is at 73%. So in layman's terms, the Bulls are crashing the glass hard on defense. They're not really trying to give up second chance points. And it's a collective effort led by Gideon Vucevic to where they're ending defensive possessions and getting right into that offense. And that's something that I think they're going to continue to do as a unit all year in terms of cleaning up that defensive glass and just keeping games sort of up and down. So it's going to be a fight because once you get to that All-Star break, you've dealt with trying to integrate Kobe White and Zach Collins probably into a team that's already been playing well. There are going to be some hiccups. There may even be some losing streaks while you're trying to integrate Kobe White just because it's such a big change from sort of, what you've had out there. But I think it's real. The Bulls are playing great defense, and we know what they're going to do offensively. So I don't think it's fair to call it a mirage for now, at least.
I am going to go the other way. I'm going to say not real. And it's not because I don't believe in what the Bulls are doing. It's because I more so don't believe in how bad the other Eastern teams are doing right now. And I think, I think it'll all balance out. The Knicks split the series or, the back-to-back with the Bulls. I think that's probably fair. I think, the Knicks probably win the other matchup if, when there's a third one. The Magic obviously are playing much worse than I anticipated. The Hawks are playing much worse than I anticipated, and the Trae Young injury is massive. I do have to apologize to you because I laughed when you said you picked the Milwaukee Bucks second in the East in our last episode. They are currently 4-2, just one game behind the Bulls. I forgot that if you have a top 3 player on the planet, you can just do whatever you want. And shout out to Ryan Rollins as well. He's been balling out. But I think the other thing
to
also
circle back on that when they got off to a very hot start, and my guy Rollins, who I made sure to shout out, definitely has been huge. I won't say I expected this, but they're also getting some contributions from some guys I didn't expect, like Cole Anthony recently has been very good for them as well, kind of adding a little bit of offensive punch. But it's like you said, when you got a former MVP in this Eastern Conference, I got to give you the benefit of the doubt.
Right. I mean, he's averaging 37 points a game. Like, I mean, you just give him the ball every single time up the floor.
And just get out there.
And then the other one is the 76ers because, obviously even though Embiid hasn't, looked the way that we thought he would, I don't know if he will ever look, at that form again. Tyrese Maxey has still been incredible, and VJ Edgecombe immediately has been awesome. Jared McCain's probably coming back. So the vibes around that team are surprisingly good. And so when I think about, are the Bulls a top 4 team? I mean, I think about the Cavs, the Knicks, the Bucks, the Sixers, and then you still have, the Bulls beat the Pistons, the Bulls beat the Magic, but over a long course of the season, things could certainly balance out. So I'm going to say not real, but I do think that I am reevaluating I believe I had preseason picked the Bulls to be 9th in the East, so I am reevaluating that. I think they're probably a little bit better than that. Next up, I kind of wanted to ask, real or not real, Chicago's defense. We heard a lot about, how this team just felt like they were out physicaled, and that's not even a word. I'm not even going to try to correct it. But the play-in game against the Heat, that was a massive point of emphasis this offseason, and it was all we heard about in the preseason training camp from Billy Donovan, from the players. So far, this defense is 12th in the NBA in points allowed. Over the first 5 games, they held opponents to 30.1% from 3. Obviously, that changed after the Knicks the last game, but still pretty strong on the season. 9th in opponent effective field goal percentage and 10th in opponent free throw rate, as we mentioned earlier. We also talked about this, very good on the defensive glass, 3rd in defensive rebounds and 19th in offensive rebounds. This is probably a better start than we thought we would expect out of a Bulls defense, especially one that has 30-something-year-old Vucevic on, at the center point. Michael, is this defense let's say top half, real or not real this season?
For that one, it's shockingly easier for me, just because that's one where I think the eye test almost really reigns supreme, even though the numbers obviously tell the story as well. I would say the defense is real. And the reason I say that is because when you're playing a style where you're going up tempo, you're running up and down the court, you're usually going to see that team not lock in on the defensive end just from a fatigue standpoint. They're trying to do so much on offense and run so fast that they're maybe not giving full effort. And with the Bulls, you don't have that problem at all. Even though they're playing at a fast pace, every guy locks in on defense. Even guys who I don't consider to be strong defenders, like Josh Giddey, was doing the best he could to keep up with Jalen Brunson and others when he got matched up on them. Trey Jones deserves a lot of credit for being a defensive playmaker. He's still leading the team with over 2 steals a game. And I believe Patrick Williams, someone who's been a solid defender, but never someone who really generates turnovers, he's averaging a steal a game this year. So you got a couple guys who are really locking in on defense, and then everyone else is just playing their part in terms of trying to stay in front of their man, defensive rebounding very strongly, not committing fouls. And I think the biggest part is just staying connected. When you watch the Bulls, you don't see a ton of defensive breakdowns, which is very unique, I think, for a team with their average age being very young. In that Knicks game, if you go back and watch, they hit a ton of threes, but a lot of those shots were contested, where the Bulls had guys running out in a reasonable amount of time trying to get a hand up in their face. As I said, there was one with Vucevic where he contested so hard I legitimately thought he was going to crash into Cat, and Cat still made the shot. So I think the most important thing is when you talk about a team that's holding opponents to poor percentages from the 3-point line and not allowing them to get up a ton of threes, you have to watch the game and see, are guys just missing shots and are being wide open, or are guys actually running out? And when I watch the Bulls, guys are actually trying to contest shots. So I think their defense is predicated off of, again, just the simple stuff, trying to stay in front of and contest every shot without fouling, and then making sure every man on the court focuses on that defensive glass, whether you're a guard or a forward or a center, because it feeds into getting that offense into transition. So I buy into the defense because you have almost zero rim protection. Nikola Vucevic, we know that's not what he does. He's just cleaning the glass. And then Jalen Smith, even though he's a decent shot blocker, he's a little bit undersized still when you're talking about some of the burlier bigs. And even with this disadvantage, we see the Bulls cleaning it up, being able to, stand toe-to-toe with a team with Paolo Banchero or with Jalen Duren in the front court. So they've went against some strong guys and held their own. So I think the defense is real. They may not be, in the top 5 or anything. They may finish 15th or 14th. But I think for a team led by a Josh Giddey, Kobe White backcourt, people would be very impressed if they finish that high defensively.
Absolutely. I'm also going to go with real. I don't have the stat in front of me, but they are, I think, a top 10 team in terms of contested shots, total attempted. 3-point shots a little bit less so, but mostly twos. And then overall, still, the eye test is telling me that this team is flying around the floor. They are hustling. They are getting in offensive players' faces. And even though there maybe aren't a ton of exemplary defenders on this team, especially not on the back line, I love the way that the overall team has bought in. And, I'm going to say it's real. Even if the statistics maybe don't match it, I think, we are also seeing ridiculously high offensive ratings and pace ratings to start the season. So we'll see how all of it balances out. I still believe in the efficacy of this being a good defensive unit moving forward.
And a big
I'll
shout
do a
out to
couple
Isaac
more.
Okoro actually as well, because Okoro, he actually just had his best offensive game, scoring in double digits against the Knicks there. But he started, and a lot of times he's barely getting up shots. He may even go scoreless. But the reason he starts every game is because he is an absolute bulldog on point of attack defense. That's why the Bulls brought him in. So just want to make sure I give Okoro a quick shout, because he hasn't had the most impactful year, but he's another example of a guy that is really going all out in terms of standing in front of his defender and making up for not having a lot on the back line defensively. So total team effort, and definitely, I believe, like you said, in that D.
A couple quick rapid fire ones as we're up over the half-hour mark, and I got to head to the north to cover the Northwestern basketball game pretty soon. But a couple quick player ones. Patrick Williams, 9 points per game, career high effective shooting percentage, 48.7% shooting percentage, and 44% from deep on over 4 attempts a game. He's been really impactful to this team so far, which is something I think a lot of Bulls fans probably wouldn't have said to start the season if you had asked them. Just a quick rapid fire, real or not real, what we're seeing out of Patrick Williams?
Yeah, Pat, I'm all over this one. I've been, you can ask many people on Twitter, president of the Pat Williams fan club, as the members had dwindled to pretty much only me. And it's real. It's real just because, again, you stated the numbers. If you compare Pat's career numbers, a lot of other years, he's put up pretty similar stats. So he is definitely a case where you have to be watching the games to sort of understand why things are so different for him. And it's that he looks aggressive. Pat Williams is just a big body, 6'8" athletic guy, and he doesn't rebound well, which is kind of shocking. He doesn't really move people around, which is really shocking. He's not an intense dunker or finisher. All things that you would expect out of his body type, he doesn't really do. And this year, you started to see him do that a little more. He has a few more dunks. He's ripped the ball straight out of guys' hands on defense. I mentioned the 1 steal per game that he's up to right now. Pat Williams is playing more aggressively. So even if the numbers don't always jump out at people, it's just about how is he trying to impose his will on defense. And I think you're seeing that this year. And then also, Pat's always shooting great from 3, but he really does deserve credit for, again, he's over 40% pretty much for most of his career, besides, I think he had a down year last season. So Pat, for sure, real.
And I mean, I just think he looks so much more relaxed overall this year. I'm really excited to see kind of what happens. I know it seems like he's been playing with the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he's been playing great so far, and big reason for the Bulls' depth. Another piece of that depth, Ayo Dosunmu. 16.2 points per game on 57% shooting. We saw what happened the last game against the Knicks when the Bulls didn't have Ayo Dosunmu in a contract year, shooting 57% overall, 47% from the field. Really could be that 5th starter, but I think a lot of people, especially Billy Donovan, are content to have him really leading that bench mob. Michael, is Ayo's play so far real or not real?
Well, for Ayo Dosunmu, the biggest part of it that's kind of difficult here is the way he's shooting the ball from 3 is obviously better than he's ever sort of knocked it down. So you do sort of worry, is this just some hot shooting that's going to tail off a little bit? But I think for Ayo, you can say it's real just because his main skill, even though he is shooting the lights out from three this year, is getting downhill. He has blazing end-to-end speed. He can really get to the basket. And per Basketball Reference, I know from like the 0 to 3 feet range, like pretty much right at the rim, Io's at 69%. Puts him at one of the highest marks on the team, up there with the big men, essentially. So when Io's getting into the paint, he's gonna finish the layup, basically. And then you couple that with the fact that he's shooting the three well. For a role player, he's kind of become weirdly unguardable because for right now, if you don't close out on the three, he's shooting the lights out from three. And if you try to close hard on Io from three, he is one of the fastest players in the league and he's going to blow right past you. So I think it's real. You're really seeing him come into his own. He's looking a lot like the Io DeSumo we saw at the University of Illinois. If anyone watched him back when he was in college, when he was playing more point guard and had more control of the offense, I think even if you see the 3-point shooting tail off a bit, again, the guy's shooting in the high 40s. So you're still talking about him shooting maybe 36, 37%, taking like 4 or 5 attempts a game if it was to tail off. So all in all, I think Io, it's 100% real because the things we're seeing him do now are really what he was starting to do before the injury slowed him down at the end of last season.
Certainly. And just kind of quick, wrap this up. We're recording this on Monday, so that means Tuesday tomorrow. The Bulls host the 76ers. Yes. Whoever wins that game will take the early lead among the Eastern Conference. Over the next week, here's who the Bulls play. They play versus the 76ers at home, at the Bucks, at the Cavs, versus the Spurs, and then at the Pistons. So a lot of really tough teams. 3 playoff teams from a year ago, plus the Victor Wembanyama Spurs, who now appear to have taken the leap, and the Sixers, who have now taken a big leap. Michael, what will the Bulls' record be over the next week, those 5 games?
Man, over those 5 games. Okay, can you give me those teams again? We got the Sixers.
Yeah. Sixers, Bucks, Cavs, Spurs, Pistons.
I'm going to go 2-3. I think they will beat the Sixers, and then I think they will beat the Pistons. The Spurs, I don't think I need to go too much into that one. If Dylan Harper plays, he's been excellent as a rookie. Obviously got to mention him because of the Bulls connection, being Ron Harper being his father. He's been dynamic. If he plays along with Wemby and what they have with Stephon Castle, they just have so much offensive talent. And then also Wemby covers up so much defensively. I think it would be hard for the Spurs to beat them, especially trying to play an up-tempo style, which I think is kind of tough to do against a Spurs team that can play that way as well with the young talent they have. The Bucks, I'm a little bit tainted by preseason. They really shot well in preseason from the 3-point line. It was where the Bulls were looking like maybe the 3-point defense wouldn't be great. So the Bucks are going to be an excellent test to see if that 3-point defense is real because you have Gary Trent, AJ Green, Miles Turner. You have a roster full of guys who are elite shooters outside of Giannis. So that's going to be a big test. Even if the Bulls hold them down for 3, I just think Giannis is a little too much and a terrible matchup. But the Sixers and the Pistons are in that group of teams where essentially I think the Bulls are in that group. I think right now, Sixers, Pistons, Orlando, Chicago, you can sort of put them, and Atlanta, you can put them all in a similar grouping to where those teams are going to finish in the same type of area. So I don't think the Bulls will have any problem beating the Sixers. They have a lot of talent, obviously, but I think if they lock in defensively, they can do enough to beat that team. The Pistons, we already saw them match up. I just think that the Pistons are actually kind of a okay matchup for the Bulls. They don't have a ton of big men who stretch the floor. They're more in the paint type guys. So Vucevic really usually plays well against Detroit because you got Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart and other bigs trying to sort of deal with him out at the perimeter. So I think the Bulls will go 2-3 over this trip. But it will still be a positive trip because I think they're going to play well even in the losses. But I just think, as you mentioned, we're hitting the part of the schedule where now every night is starting to be a very good team, almost a title contending team. And I didn't even mention the Cavs just because I think in terms of the Eastern Conference, the Cavaliers might be quite literally the worst matchup for the Bulls. And it's just because of the twin towers of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. That's a lot of size and defense and rebounding against a Bulls team that focuses on playing on the smaller side. So I got them a very, very encouraging 2-3 over that 5-game stretch.
I went with a similar one of 2-3. I initially went Bucks and Pistons, and then upon thinking about it, I'm intrigued to see how the the Giannis and Miles Turner two big lineup goes against the Mattis and Vooch, or Mattis and Jalen Smith. It'll be really interesting to see how that works. I'm going to give the Bucks the edge at home. Michael, it's been a pleasure having you as always. Anything you want to plug, anything you want to shout out before we wrap up this episode?
Oh, I mean, yeah, just follow the Bulls Roundtable Podcast, of course, to hear us discussing the team. And follow me on Twitter at ZenMasterMike, or you can just look up my name, Michael Walton. That is where you will be able to keep up with all the latest news and stories we got coming up. We're going to have a lot of good stuff this week because, again, as you already mentioned, Gavin, the Bulls have perhaps their toughest stretch of the season coming up. So this will be a great stretch to evaluate and really see if things are real or not, as we sort of discussed today, because I think overall it's about that 15 to 20 game mark where you really get a feel for your team. So these next 10 to 15 are going to be great for Bulls fans to really get a feel for this squad.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Michael. And overall, that about wraps up our episode of the Bulls Roundtable Podcast. As always, you can remember to subscribe to our stuff on YouTube and Spotify to get, weekly episodes of the Bulls Roundtable Podcast, and also videos from press conferences, short form video content with our thoughts, etc. Make sure to read all of our content at roundtable.io/sports/NBA/Bulls to read all of our stories and what we're saying about the Bulls, our reporting as we are on the ground. You can make your own community posts as well, and follow along with our game threads, interact with other Bulls fans, everything you could want out of a Chicago Bulls community. Once again, thanks so much for joining the Chicago Bulls Roundtable Podcast, and we'll see you around this time next week.